One of the most important aspects of sustaining long-term relationships is communication. It's easy to connect with someone and then let the relationship get stuck due to a lack of follow-up. To keep the connection alive, make a conscious effort to stay in touch. This doesn't mean constantly reaching out with requests or updates, but rather maintaining a friendly and consistent line of communication. A simple message to check in or share something of value can go a long way in reinforcing your relationship. For example, if you come across an article or resource that you think might interest a connection, share it with them, even if you haven't spoken in a while. This shows that you're thinking of them and are invested in maintaining the relationship. Currently, urban regeneration projects in degraded areas have been promoted as improving the well-being of residents and solving environmental injustice problems. However, such environmental improvements in ethnic communities and/or low-income households can create an urban green space paradox. The creation of new, high-quality green spaces can increase attractiveness, making these neighborhoods more desirable. By contrast, the cost of housing can rise, and residents may not be able to afford the rent. This results in the exclusion or displacement of the poor neighborhood's residents, who were intended to benefit from the ecosystem services provided by the new green space. In turn, the residents may only be able to afford to live in a similar degraded neighborhood to the one they left, with low access to green infrastructure. A situation forcing out city residents, green renewals aim to help. An increasing awareness of our effect on the ocean is slowly seeping into the public agenda, dragging behind it a conversation that is decades overdue. But this conversation faces a massive obstacle. It's almost impossible to discuss what to do about something changing if you don't initially know how it works. If a doctor tells a patient that they have a problem with their kidneys, the patient probably already has at least a vague idea about where their kidneys are and what they're up to. They learned about that part of their own personal life support system at school. But that's not the case for the oceans. When we see a news story about the long-term decline in the numbers of krill in the Southern Ocean, it sounds generally like a bad thing. But there's far more to it than the risk of whales going hungry. Krill are a part of the ocean engine. We need to understand at least some of the context before we can discuss the change and take appropriate action. Rome was said to have been a melting pot from the very start. The historian Livy claimed the city's original population was comprised of immigrants flooding in from all directions, attracted by Romulus's deliberate policy of non-discrimination. It was this initial openness, Livy asserts, that laid the foundations for the later strength and success of the city. Romans described their city as multicultural in the generations after its foundation. Tradition held that only a minority of the city's legendary kings were Roman-born, with the others all arriving as immigrants before being chosen for the throne for their virtues and merits. As the empire expanded across 3 continents, Rome eagerly adopted new cultural influences and absorbed incoming groups, perhaps a little too eagerly for some, who, like the poet Juvenal, complained about the rapid rate of cultural change. Cultural openness as a foundation for Rome's growth. The laws and constants of physics and the fundamental forces in our universe have very precise forms and values. This means that, if they were only very slightly different, life would not have been possible. For instance, the precise value of gravity has enabled our universe to arise by permitting the aggregation of dust and gas particles to protostars around which planets later came to orbit, including the Earth around the Sun. If the value of the electron had been ever so slightly larger or smaller, chemistry as we know it would not have been possible, and life, which is based on organic chemistry, could not have started. The universe was not designed for us to evolve. We have no privileged position in the universe. However, the laws and constants of physics allowed advanced life to evolve. The universe for life. Human beings have evolved to make the most of the resources available to them in ways that are subtle and complicated. When we change our diets, especially when we do so quickly, we are effectively conducting huge experiments in nutrition. We ought to have more humility. Nutritional science is still young, and there is so much we do not know. If we have eaten certain foods in certain ways for millennia, we should assume, until it is proven otherwise, that there is probably a good reason why. Traditional foods that don't fit neatly on the contemporary dietary food plate should generally be chosen over highly processed ones that do. We should assume that traditionally made fatty blood sausages are preferable to lean, factory-made salamis, that spoonfuls of honey are superior to sprinkles of sweeteners. Witnessing how poorly traditional societies are faring as they undergo a nutrition transition should make those who have already completed it question whether their diets have moved too far. While convenience and technology are crucial, they are not the only factors driving Gen Z's financial decisions. This generation is incredibly values-driven, and they want to bank with institutions that match their personal beliefs and values. Transparency is vital. Gen Z is skeptical of large corporations and institutions that lack accountability. They have grown up in a world where information is freely available, and they expect complete transparency from the brands they support. Banks, for example, must clearly communicate fees, terms, and conditions, as well as how they handle customers' data. Moreover, ethical banking practices are more important than ever. Gen Z cares about the environment, social justice, and the ethical implications of their financial decisions. They are interested in sustainable investing, supporting businesses that match their values, and ensuring that their money is not being used to fund harmful practices. Banks that offer socially responsible investment opportunities and are committed to environmental sustainability will attract Gen Z's attention. Myths aren't only stories. For example, a well-known myth that persists today is the supposed high iron content in spinach. This is a legend that dates back to 1890 and originates from a simple miscalculation by physiologist Gustav von Bunge. He accurately determined that 100 grams of spinach contained 35 milligrams of iron, but he was analyzing dried spinach, which held 10 times more iron than the same amount of fresh leafy greens. Although the error was swiftly corrected, the correction was just as swiftly forgotten. The myth had taken hold. Popeye, who gained superhuman strength from the leafy greens and defended himself with iron fists, contributed to its endurance. And even today, some nearly 150 years later, parents the world over use this tale to try to persuade their children into eating the healthy vegetable. The technical term often used to describe animals' judgment of numbers is the approximate number system. What it does not provide is precision. It shows, and this is the same in every species tested, a characteristic pattern of errors, with discrimination becoming less accurate as the quantities get bigger. Rhesus monkeys can tell 1 from 2, 2 from 3, 3 from 4, 4 from 5, but start to fail from 5 upwards. Rats that learn to press a lever a given number of times, from 4 up to 24, became markedly less and less precise in their responses as the number increased. By the top end of the range, they would merely produce a spread of numbers around the target. It is a common observation that when testing the accuracy of animals' number sense, the size of the numbers matters. Despite the cultural trope depicting emotions as the opposite of rational thought, cognition, what we commonly refer to as thinking, is actually a key building block of emotion. How we think about our circumstances shapes the emotions we experience. Then those emotions echo back to influence how we think. For instance, if you walk into a test thinking you are bad at taking tests, your anxiety will be increased. Then you don't feel good about your performance on the test, and that becomes evidence for continuing to think that you're bad at test taking. In this way, there's simply no pulling apart emotion and cognition. This bidirectionality of cognition and emotion allows us to adjust difficult emotions by changing the way we think. By thinking differently, I get nervous sometimes, but I'm still a good test taker, or that nervous feeling is just excitement and anticipation, it means I'm ready, you can work those pathways to your advantage. Social media serves as an important context. Social media serves as an important context to facilitate autobiographical remembering. Personal events posted on social media platforms are better remembered and less forgotten than those not posted, independent of the characteristics of the events. This may be because sharing memories online allows individuals to rehearse and make sense of what happened, thus facilitating long-term memory retention. Online feedback, such as comments and likes, as well as technological features such as algorithms and periodic reminders, can further serve as memory cues for the posted event details. As a result, event details shared on social media are likely stabilized and remembered over time, whereas those not shared may become inaccessible or forgotten. Multisensory experiences are a central part of our everyday lives, yet we often take them for granted, especially when our senses function normally or are corrected to normal with aids like glasses. However, closer inspection to any, even the most ordinary experiences, reveals the remarkable multisensory world in which we live. Consider the experience of eating a regular meal. At first, it may seem like an ordinary experience, but it is actually a fusion of the senses. We first eat with our eyes, but we are also exposed to countless sensory signals that influence our eating experience, such as food textures, tastes, and smells. And it does not stop there. Even the sounds that come both from the atmospheres in which we eat and our interactions with the food, such as chewing, and the tools we use to eat, influence our eating experience. Humans are not the most social animal. Ants, bees, and termites put humanity to shame on many metrics of sociality. A wide variety of relatives live together with perfectly harmonious behavior and collectively care for their young. But while insect colonies are impressively social places, it's not our kind of social life. Bees always build hexagonal hives, ants march in lines, and termites move in zigzag formations. These patterns recur predictably because they are tightly programmed genetically and propelled pheromonally. We humans are more free, less tightly programmed genetically, so our social patterns can be more diverse and dynamic. Every group dances a slightly different dance, and these choreographies change across generations. We still think and act in ways that are in harmony with others around us, but it is through patterns that are more shaped by nurture, not just nature. Kivitz, Erminsky, and Zheng partnered with a cafe to test the motivating effect of illusory progress in an experiment. Customers received a reward card that offered one free coffee after they'd bought 10. While half of the customers received a card with 10 open slots, the other half got a card with 12 open slots. Yet the 12-slot card had two pre-existing bonus stamps. So, strictly speaking, these were identical reward programs. Every customer who got a card needed to make 10 coffee purchases and collect 10 stamps to get their free coffee. But the appeal of the free stamps was high. People who thought they'd gotten a head start came back to the cafe more often, filling in their reward card more quickly than the others. When the card came with 2 out of 12 slots already filled, it felt to customers like they were already 16% finished with the goal before they'd even started. Believing they were closer to the reward, they were more motivated to reach the finish line. According to the study above, customers were more driven to complete their goals when they perceived the reward as nearer.